We've indicated before that the intent to give accounts for one's own sense of security and fulfillment. We were at pains, however, to indicate that this intent to give doesn't mean being nice. It means giving each situation its due, which means you act consistently with either the generosity or the courage that's operative in the situation that you're in. And we said, for example, that if a hungry child asks you for food, the appropriate thing to do is to give the child food. If you see a little old lady being beaten up in a park, the appropriate thing to do is to beat up the thug. So if you look at these two experiences from a purely behavioral point of view, it sounds like there's a contradiction, but there's no contradiction. Sometimes being here to give does mean to confront. However, what we did indicate is that of those two, if you see giving its situation its due as the root of the matter, of the two elements of generosity and courage, generosity is the primary element, because clearly if you're here to give, then your fundamental demeanor towards the world will be kind. What's also true about giving each situation its due is that it's really concerned with how you act. It's about what you do in the outward. And this is based on a corresponding skill, which is an inner skill, which is really concerned with seeing things as they are. If you don't see things as they are, it's clearly not possible to give the situation its due. And that also then requires us to account for the inner equivalent of generosity and the inner equivalent of courage. The inner equivalent of generosity is, in fact, gratitude. And gratitude is, in a sense, a master key to the whole issue, because if I'm grateful, then clearly I know that I've received in excess of my due, and knowing that I've received in excess of my due enables me to give away, which is really the essence of what generosity is about. If I look at the past and I know that I've received in excess of my due, it's probably easy for me to trust that things will go well in the future. And if I trust that things will go well in the future, I will behave in a courageous way. So gratitude is the master key, and it's rooted therefore on this assumption or this insight that seeing things as they are is to be grateful. Now, very often people have a discomfort with that because they say, well, that's really not how we experience things. Bad things happen to good people. And so I think it's important to recognize that these categories of transactional correctness don't just account for your own sort of inwardness and outwardness. They actually account for how you pattern with the social other. In other words, other people around you. And they also kind of indicate that if you're looking at the past in the spirit of gratitude and you're looking at the future in the spirit of trust, there's an attribute to this. And there's an attribute to how you engage socially with others. And that attribute is a kind of a spirit of submission. Now, it is precisely here where people have a discomfort because, you can't trust the world. I mean, you can't trust other people is, very often our view of things. But in the first instance, we have to understand that we, on a very granular basis, actually account for how we produce the patterns of relationships that we have around us. I mean, my gratitude enables the generosity of others. You must have heard this line of text out of your mouth 1,000 times in your life. Something akin to, I won't give that so-and-so anything ever again. He's completely ungrateful. In other words, if the self is ungrateful, if the self acts either in the spirit of resentment or entitlement, you disable the generosity of others. They don't want to give you anything anymore. Whereas there's nothing more pleasurable than giving something to somebody who's truly grateful. So the gratitude of the self enables the generosity of the other. Also, the trust of the self enables the courage of the other. And an example of this is the sort of blindfold falling exercise that you very often have in corporate environments. And, say you're dealing with a team of people, you've got a blindfold person standing in the middle and you ask them to fall. First of all, in them falling, what they're doing is they're trusting that the people around them will actually catch them. Now, it therefore suggests that the people standing on the periphery, the people standing in the circle, the other, as far as the blindfolded person is concerned, accept responsibility for the trust that is being given to them, which suggests that this idea of accepting responsibility means you are putting your own backside on the line. You are accepting accountability for the situation that you're in. You're courageous to accept accountability. So the trust of the self enables the courage of the other. Just like obviously the courage of the other enables the trust of the self. If I know that you're as good as your word, that you will catch me, it's easy for me to trust you. So my gratitude enables their generosity, and my trust enables their courage. It means that if I see things as they are, then I will know that my gratitude in the past will produce a world that is both looking after me, that is both giving to me generously and looking after me in a courageous way. And also suggests, therefore, that I don't have an issue with the other. I in a sense, I submit. Even in this blindfold falling exercise, I mean, the people that have the explicit power are the people on the periphery. It is not the blindfold itself in the middle of the circle. And it suggests that power is not an attribute of the self. Power is an attribute of the other. The easiest way to explain this is to think about the relationship between a boss that you'll work for because you have to and a boss that you'll work for because you want to. Clearly, if you ask yourself, well, who's got real power? The boss that you'll work for because you have to, or the boss that you'll work for because you want to, then it'll be the boss that you work for because you want to. And if the question is, well, why is that the case? Well, it's because you're loyal to the boss. In other words, you've given the boss your loyalty. He only has power because you've given it to him. In other words, the self, the one, cannot wear power on the inside. Power is given to the self from others. What the boss that you work for because you want to has to do is that boss has to submit to your best interest. So the submission of the self enables the power of the other. And that actually then produces somebody who looks powerful from the outside. So if you see things as they are, you look at the past with gratitude, you look at the future with trust, and you'll submit. And you will pattern a world around you that will be generous towards you, that will be courageous towards you. In other words, take responsibility that will be legitimately powerful, that will protect you. Now, a weakness in this argument is, if you like, this sort of social cynicism that we very often have, particularly if we come at life from a critical point of view. Because people say, but what about the sort of terrible things that happen? What about the oppression of people? What about slavery and, child abuse and these terrible things that happen? And I'd suggest that these categories aren't just true in sort of the minutiae of the day-to-day interactions of how we actually pattern relationships around ourselves. These categories are actually operative in terms of the self and the social other from a big picture point of view. I mean, if you saw things as they are, you would see that the other has given you wildly in excess of your due. I mean, that the social other has been immensely generous with you. An example I like to give is the shirt that I wear. I mean, it's a common or garden thing. It's something that you don't really give much attention to, your shirt. But you have to understand that the shirt of yours has quite a history behind it. I mean, very long ago, 10,000 years ago, some very clever human beings discovered that you could spin plant fibers into yarn. And then sometime later, some other very clever human beings discovered that you could take that yarn and weave it into a fabric. And then not that long ago, a few centuries ago, some very clever English engineers discovered that you could create these big mechanical looms that then produce woven fabric garments that produce the conditions where every one of the 7 or 8 billion of us on the planet today no longer have to wear skins. We wear woven fabric garments, We don't pay a cent royalty to any of the human beings who collaborated over millennia to produce the shirt on your back. And that's just the shirt on your back. If you consider all of the things that you have access to as a modern human being, you will recognize that you stand on the shoulders of giants. You've been made, your life has been made for you. You've been absolutely bequeathed a blessing from other human beings and past generations that is an unpayable debt. Not only have you been given in excess of your due, the other has protected you. The other has taken responsibility to protect you. Human beings aren't viable until they're sort of in their, I suppose minimum would be 9th or 10th year of their lives. It has taken other human beings, in a sense, to stand between you, adults, to stand between you and the wildness of the universe that we face, to protect you from the wildness of the universe that we face so that you can become a viable adult. If it wasn't for the fact that metaphorically your parents stood between the lions of the bush and you lying by the fire, you would be eaten by the lion. So the social other has been our benefactor and the social other has been our protector. So it is quite appropriate to say that when I see things as they are, I will look at others in a deep spirit of gratitude. I would look at others in a deep spirit of trust, and I would submit. And it's precisely that then that produces the generosity of others towards me, the courage of others towards me, and the real power that you have in the social cohesion of groups. The group becomes powerful. The other becomes powerful when the self submits. Thank you.